Welcome to the Money Metaphors podcast with Jason Coddington. Jason, good to be with you. Nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you. It's good to be back.
So today on the menu, we're going to talk about retirement plans for small businesses. I would imagine that there are quite a few people that probably are just happy to have a small business. I don't know if they've thought very much about what to do further along down the line.
Yeah, I think, well, and depending on what state you are, like we're in California, so the state mandates that you have a retirement plan for your employees. And so if you don't have one, you can adopt theirs. But they're starting, and I think other states, California being as progressive as it is, other states will likely follow. So that's the case. So over the past 24 months, we've gotten a lot of questions over what different retirement plans, what works, what doesn't work. And there's really some critical questions you have to ask or yourself. And today we hope to provide that insight. And so once we do that, then you'll be able to make informed decision and start really filtering what you want to do and establish. And know that once you choose a retirement plan, it's not etched in stone. You can always, pivot as your business grows and adopt a one that might be more suitable for your size. But we'll talk about that today. I'm going to use a couple analogies today. We'll use steak. We're going to use beef and how to cook it. So as some analogies on picking your retirement plan. So I don't know. Hopefully that'll be intriguing. We'll even have some resources, I think, at the end of how to prepare our favorite tenderloin and then also some brisket notes by our favorite brisket preparers in the country, and that's Aaron Franklin out of Texas and Terry Scott out of Austin. So
nice.
I think I said we're gonna have to edit that because it's not right. It's yeah. Let's see.
Where do you want to pick it up?
It's Terry Black. We can pick it up now. Just I'll just start with the resources right here.
You got it.
So yeah, even, we'll even have some cool resources at the end in addition to some checklists for retirement, but we'll give you some links to some processes for cooking a great tenderloin, which we like to cook every year in our family at Christmas. And we'll also put a link to some brisket processes used by Aaron Franklin out of Texas and also Terry Black out of Texas. And so we visited both of those places, and it's just fun to see how they cook a brisket and learn from them. So if you ever do it on your own, so if you get nothing else out of this podcast today, learning about retirement plans, you'll at least learn how to make an awesome tenderloin and a cool brisket.
That sounds like a fair trade to me.
Yeah.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
So I will be down in the show notes later. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah. So what do you mean in terms of making this metaphor of cooking a steak or a brisket? Explain that and how it relates to choosing retirement plans.
Yeah, so I think when you go to cook a steak or a chop or a cut of beef, you really need to look at a couple things, right? And again, and I'm no chef. I've learned all of this by research and of course trial and error. So, but what I've learned is that the type of cut of meat is going to dictate how the best way to process it or cook it. So, we'll take, for example, like a tenderloin or a fillet, very tender, lean piece of meat. Ideally, and of course, again, this is how we do it. But, once we have a lean cut of meat, we're looking at direct heat. So that's either open flame or like on a cast iron skillet. And it's not going to cook very long, and that would be like your fillet. Your ribeye, slightly longer, a little bit more fat on that cut of meat, but still probably more direct flame. Some people can smoke. You can smoke any kind of meat, but of course, the smaller the cut or the leaner the cut, the less time you're going to smoke it. So basically, when it comes to cuts of meat, it's how lean is it? Does it have a lot of fat or is it lean? Of course, what process are you going to use? You use smoke, you use direct heat. and then how long you're going to cook it. And so the analogy there is, like for example, like a brisket. Brisket's a fatter, larger cut of meat. And although the pros that we talked about earlier in this, they don't temperature test their brisket at the end. It's common knowledge that the internal temperature of a brisket's 200 degrees when you pull it off of there, and you're going to let it rest anywhere from 3 to 4 hours before you serve it. Whereas a filet, you're going to cook it and then you're going to want to serve that relatively quick, or a ribeye relatively quick. And so, I think, and if you would never cook a filet to 200 degrees internal temperature, because it's beyond well done, it's, leather at that point. So a lot of that just, depends, so there's some factors basically that we have to look at. And, those factors are lean meat, how lean is it? And based on that, what's the temperature that we need to cook it at, and then what's the time frame. And so that's the analogy. And so the analogy then is, when you look at retirement plans, there's basically 3 things you need to be considering, and we're going to talk about that next. And so one is, how many employees do you have? What's the size of your payroll? So we need to talk about that. And based upon that, we can start looking at different plans that are most appropriate. So for example, if you're just a single practitioner, independent contractor, like let's say a doctor, a real estate agent, or another professional consultant, and you don't have any employees, there are some resources out there. A single 401k is an example. A SEP IRA is another example. And then of course, a simple IRA is also another example. Now there's some other plans as well, but we're just going to focus on those 3 today. If you're having a great year, if you're, a doctor or perhaps a real estate agent, it's had a really great year. There's some cash balance plans that you can do, but those are a little more complicated and require some additional tax advice. And so we'll kind of back away from those today and stick with, the 3 primary options for you, which are a 401k, a simple IRA, and a SEP IRA. So that's that's for one employee. Now, if you have, anywhere from 0, if you have 1 employee to, let's say, 10 in that range, then, again, that's going to also show up, the SEP, the simple, and the 401k are options. But now it starts to determine, that leads us to the next question, is what, the next thing you need to consider. So the first is how many employees and the size of your payroll. And the second would be how much employee choice, support, and flexibility do you want your employees to have? So one of the things we find with, like, for example, one of the easiest ones to install is a SEP IRA. And what's interesting about the SEP IRA is, once you start that, it's pretty easy to get started. So, it just requires, you open a SEP IRA account for yourself at your local, your brokerage firm or bank. If you, of course, if you're going to work with us, we would help you do that. But you open that up and it's relatively simple. It's just as easy as opening up a regular IRA account for the most part. The interesting thing about that SEP IRA, though, is, how much you can contribute as an owner. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But one of the key pieces of a SEP IRA is, an owner can put up to 25% of your income, not to exceed 66,000. So you can put a chunk of money in there. So
Wow.
So that sounds good, and that's great. But here's the trick with a SEP IRA, that for that small employer out there, whatever you do for yourself, you have to do for every employee. So, if you've got 5 employees, each making $100,000 a year, that now once you make 25% contribution on yourself, you're now going to have to do 25% for them. That money is theirs, so there's no, we could potentially, if we installed a different type of plan, a profit sharing plan, put some teeth into it a little bit, but just simply a SEP IRA is, basically 25% maximum contribution up to 66,000, and whatever you do for yourself, you have to do for everybody else. And so that's kind of the SEP IRA. That creates an opportunity for the business owner, but it also creates a little bit of a cash flow issue, because maybe they don't have the resources to contribute and say, I want to help my employees, but I can't do 25% for all of them. So that's when we start looking at another type of plan called a simple IRA. So a simple IRA is basically kind of meant to be a stepping stone from a SEP IRA to a 401k. So,
Okay.
and I know I'm using a lot of languages here in acronyms. So rest assured, I'm going to simplify this, but I think what's interesting is, or what's important is we're going to have resources for you at the end of this podcast. You can click on and lay it all out nice and simple and in a grid format where you can just, look down what makes the most sense and, and start deciding, and go from there. And of course, we'll have some resources on our website you can look at as well. So let's talk about and transition to the simple IRA. And if Bill, you have any questions so far on how we're tracking here?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of waiting here for a moment. I'm gonna withhold questions for the moment and let you lay those three out, because I've got some questions about the differences between them. But why don't you explain what they are first, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So we talked about the SEP IRA. Then we move on to something called the simple IRA. And the simple IRA is for those individuals that, smaller employees, and basically who want to have, the flexibility like a 401k, but not necessarily the cost structure and the administration of a 401k. So we'll talk about that in a second. So the nice thing about a simple IRA is basically for an employer, with 100 or fewer employees, and each of those employees at least earned $5,000 in a year, they would be eligible to contribute. And then, basically what's nice about it in the simple IRA, the maximum you can contribute is $15,500 into the plan. And of course, if you're over 50, you can add an additional $3,500. So the one difference between that and the SEP is, the SEP was 66,000, whereas this is 15,500. So if you're an owner, it doesn't allow you to put as much in. But the next part is how you handle your employees with the simple IRA. So with a simple IRA, you are only required as an employer to help those that want to help themselves. Whereas with a SEP IRA, it's a blanket across the board contribution. Yeah. So in this particular case with a simple IRA, if you can offer the plan and, let's say those same exact employees that worked for you under the SEP example, you have 5 employees making $100,000 a year. I'm doing that just to make the math easy. Let's say one of them wants to contribute, let's say 4 of them want to contribute and 1 doesn't. So gotcha. The employer would only be on the hook to help support the 4 that want to contribute. And his maximum allowable, or, he can always put more if he would like, but he's required to put 3%, up to 3% of the person's pay. So if I'm making $100,000 and I'm an employee and I want to put $3,000 in, as the employer, I'm required to then match that with $3,000. If another employee wants to put in $2,500, the employer is only on the hook for the $2,500. And of course, they can make non-elective contributions, if they would like. So again, just to kind of some big picture ideas, but those are the big differences, right? Because with a SEP IRA, it's a blanket across the board. I want to do something for everybody. The simple IRA reduces the amount of money you contribute as an owner, but it also reduces the amount that you have to match for, an employee. Now, the employee, the nice thing about the simple IRA is they too can put up to $15,500 in the account if they're less than 50, and if they're over 50, they can add an additional $3,500. So that is really, the SEP and the simple IRA commonly used for businesses that have, 10 employees or less. So, that's quite nice. And those are, those are some
Are those relatively low cost administrative, like fees and stuff, low
virtually
cost?
low, yeah, relatively low cost. I would, I think there's always a hidden cost with a simple IRA, in that, there's not plan administration fees like you would have with um, uh, a 401k,
Yeah,
but there is some administration that your payroll service, or, if you're doing your own payroll in house, you have to do, if you don't have a retirement plan now, it's going to require probably, and again, everybody's different, maybe an hour additional per payroll period to do the calculations, and I
okay.
mean, there's software now that helps and makes that less, but every employee is different, but there are some calculations and that requires labor. So I don't want to say it's completely free, because there is an increase in labor to process the payroll,
Yeah, well, and it clearly, if you're an employer, it's clearly going to cost you money because you're going to be matching or you're going to be contributing to that simple IRA or that SEP for your
Exactly.
employees.
Absolutely. That was the next. So that, it's a benefit too. So yes, it's a cost to you. But again, there's retention costs, right? So if you have a high
Yeah,
turnover in your, as an employer, because you don't have a retirement plan, you could argue that the investment in your employees helps them stay longer, those kinds of things. And so, again, I think what's nice about retirement plans for small business is, the way I see it is, it's almost like if we have the Venn diagram of, we want to help our employees. And, again, help everybody save for retirement, and then also help the employer, and
sure.
along the way, if we can save some taxes, that's nice. That's nice as well. So, and, there are some provision that, and I'll go into probably later at a different podcast. There were some provisions passed, and this will actually apply to the 401k, which I'll talk about next. And the Secure Act 2.0 last December, that now allows for Roth contributions for some of these plans. So
Oh, nice. Okay.
the nice thing about that is, if you're at a certain, depending on your tax bracket, if you're a younger person and you want to put money away in a simple and a SEP, and you want to do it in a Roth format, you would be able to do that now. Whereas, prior to last year, you weren't able to do that. And that's nice. And again, real quick, retirement refresh there. A Roth IRA is money you put in after tax, and later on in life, it comes out income tax free. And regular contributions, of course, you get the deduction now, but later on they come out taxable. So it's nice to have that option. And of course, the next plan we'll talk about, the 401k, you can have the opportunity to have both if you choose. And so, and again, and I should say, you can also have both with the SEP and the simple. It's just going to be, it's a newer program because, everybody was set up with simples and SEPs to just do regular contributions. And so a lot of these firms, vendors that we use and we work with, they're all updating their paperwork to allow for Roth contributions now. So double check. And of course, everything we say today, everything, as always, you got to check with your accountant and your, attorneys if necessary, about the tax ramifications and implications for your individual business. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why, as you get ready to talk about 401ks, it's a good simple reminder that this is good practical information. But if you're going to sit down and do something about it, you should sit down with a financial advisor, either you, or if you already have one, your own FA, and work it out with them. Because these products can be straightforward, but straightforward in financial world's always got a tricky component to it. It seems to me, I've learned over the years.
yeah, and there's just moving parts there, and it's nice to
Yeah.
have. We like to work. We work hand in hand with our clients, tax advisors, and we would advocate for that in any relationship. But today, again, the next time you're eating a nice juicy steak, and you're trying to decide whether you should do a retirement plan or not, just remember there's the SEP IRA or the simple plan, and then of course, if you wanted to do kind of all the bells and whistles, the 401k, We'll talk about that. We'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
tell me about the 401k, because I mean, is that not really for like small business, like a 10 employees or less? Is this really more for
Yeah,
a
well, that's
company with
great.
more employees, or?
It's great that you asked that. So, I mean, up for a while, this is the advent of technology and competition and vendor pricing, but the cost to administer a 401k has really come down over the past few years. And with
Well,
technology and efficiencies, you can add and product innovation, you can add quite a bit and provide a nice benefit through a 401k package to, a small, to a small group of employees, even 10 or less. Like we have a couple of clients that have 10 or less employees and haven't decided to go with the 401k program. And so, but yes, historically 401k was just, big multi-billion dollar companies had them. And then, over the years, they're more accessible. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The major difference with the 401k is, typically they cost a little bit more to administer.
okay.
And there are bells and whistles that you can add. I won't get into too many of them today, but you can allow for loans if you so choose as an employer on the 401k balance. We don't typically advocate for that, but you can add for loans, special distribution options in some cases. But the nice thing about the 401k is, and I'm talking plan structure here. I'm not talking about what it's invested in. The nice
Right.
thing about 401k is it has a lot of flexibility for the owner, and it has flexibility for the employee. And really all that's changing between a simple IRA and a 401k is really just comes down to the additional features that you would like to add. So I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast, if you're just kind of thinking, I want to do something, I don't think the SEP IRA is for me because I don't know that I want to do it for all my employees or that all my employees would appreciate it. And I don't really have $66,000 to put away. Maybe I want to get started with the simple. We get you started with the simple. And then, as you adapt to the plan and decide you want more and more guidance, then the 401k starts making some sense. Now the difference, again, there's some cost, there's some reports that have to be filed with the IRS. I already call the form 5500. That of course, and the plan has to be tested. And what tested means is that the highly compensated people aren't the only ones using the plan. You need to make sure that everybody can use the plan. There's these rules called top heavy rules. And so what the IRS has done is they've come out and said, and rightly so, have said, if you have a plan that only the highest compensated people in the organization are contributing to, and none of the other workers are contributing to, then you have what's called the top heavy plan, and that's not allowed. And so you would then have to have contributions removed from the retirement plan, and you don't really want that. So I'm going to take that information right there about the 401k. I'm going to add one phrase in there that's going to make this easier to, I believe, to comprehend. And there's a word called the safe harbor 401k. And what makes the safe harbor 401k and the simple 401k, or excuse me, the simple IRA very similar is, remember I talked about in the simple IRA how if you have contributions that you would like to make on behalf of your employees, you could do that so long as you chose a specific amount each and every year. So
Okay.
there was a matching program. So we'll take those same 5 employees. They're each making $100,000 a year under the 401k plan. Let's say one doesn't want to contribute. The next one wants to contribute, let's say, 3%, or perhaps 4%, let's say $4,000. You as an employer, as long as you offer that 4% as a match to the employee that's contributing, you then don't have to worry about what's called those top heavy rules. Okay. So if you offer a safe harbor plan, as long as you're matching your employees that want to, now only those that contribute. So as long as you're matching each and every one of your employees, as what's called, an elective contribution. You're choosing to support, dollar for dollar, 100% of their first 4% of contributions. And each plans you can choose the amount if you would like in your plan, but it can't be less than, in many cases, it can't be made, less than 3%. And again, this is, confirm that with your accountant and your plan administrator. But so if you're willing to say, I'm working for you, and I'm making, $100,000 a year as one of these employees, and I put $4,000 in there, I know that you as my employer are going to give me $4,000. And I also, that money is, if I leave in 3 years and go to another firm, that money is mine to take. I'm not beholden by any what's called vesting rules or anything like that.
Well, I wanted to ask about that. I've been sitting here waiting to ask about vesting, because everywhere I've ever worked, that vesting thing was there. And it cost me on a couple of occasions, because the vesting period was longer than I was with the company, so that I lost the money. And I mean, is vesting vesting, it seems like, is not an option on the Simple IRA or the SEPA.
Yeah, if on the safe harbor 401k and the simple IRA, okay, they are not, the vesting is not there. There doesn't have to be a vesting schedule.
Okay.
So where, and I'm going to confuse this a little bit. I'll make it slight. We're going to add a little twist here, but on a 401k plan, you can have what's called profit sharing contributions. And let's say you're working for me, Bill, and we've had a great year. And not only do I match your salary deferral of 4%, but let's say I'm going to give everybody in the company a 10% contribution to their 401k, and I offer to do that, and that's under a 401k plan, or excuse me, that's under a profit sharing plan. In addition to the 401k, I can choose to have a vesting schedule on that money, so that, hey, you know what, I've paid you 10% on your money, but if you leave within 5 years, you're not going to get all of it. So that's, vesting is typically in today's world is likely tied to profit sharing plans, and sometimes you can do a profit sharing plan and a 401k together.
Okay.
So you can kind of mix those. So I would suggest, again, I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but it's a great question. Vesting is important, but the nice thing about a safe harbor plan is, under the safe harbor, you have the ability to, help those that want to help themselves, and not have to concern yourself from a vesting standpoint, because you're offering everybody the same option. Much like the simple IRA, the safe harbor 401k operates the same way. The other thing that's really big, and we like this from a planning standpoint as advisors, is a couple from a budgeting standpoint, both the simple IRA and the safe harbor 401k, you can literally run a payroll report on your employees for a year or the quarter, and you can kind of extrapolate what it's going to cost you, assuming everybody contributed at the 3 or 4% level, right?
Oh, okay.
So from a budgeting standpoint, you can kind of get an idea of where you're at from a planning perspective. The other thing about the safe harbor 401k that we like is there's not the element of surprise, right? So if you have, and what do I mean by that? If you have a 401k that's not in the safe harbor, right? And they're just, people are, again, I mentioned, let's say we have an agricultural processing plant, and let's say the sales individuals and the administration individuals are making quite a large amount, they're making larger salaries than, let's say, someone driving the forklift. Again, nothing wrong with those jobs, but they just make more. Well, the forklift driver may be only contributing 5%, and the people in sales and or admin might be contributing 15%. And a regular 401k outside of the safe harbor rules, the plan administrator is going to run a test, and this goes to cost. Again, this is why these plans cost a little bit more, because they have to test it and make sure, okay, well, do we have a top heavy plan? Are the highly compensated individuals the only ones contributing to this plan? And if so, they will do a calculation and you will have to remove those contributions. So, here in the, from a planning perspective, we don't like that because we like to know if an employee puts away, if I'm working with one of the sales guys there and they put away $15,000 in their 401k, they like to know that 14,000 is going to, that it's not, excuse me, $15,000 in their 401k. They'd like to know that if they do that, that money's not going to have to be given back, and be taxable.
That'd be a nightmare.
It would be a nightmare. Yeah. And, and so the safe harbor solves that. It solves it. And we like it that way from a planning perspective. You kind of have your knowns and, and again, we're talking, companies with, 100 employees or less, typically, or, is the threshold, I think if you have 75 or more employees, you probably won't have top heavy rules, but, if you're at, if you only have 10 employees or 20 employees, you could run into those issues. And so we just advocate for the safe harbor plan. And just makes sense. And the other thing I will say, the one major difference between the simple, IRA and the 401k safe harbor plan is, how much you can contribute. If you remember the simple, I told you could up to 15,500 in a simple IRA. In a 401k, it's 22,500. And then of course, if you're over 50, you can add another 7,500, making it $30,000. So again, that's where, we have to kind of zoom, we kind of got in the weeds a little bit. Now I just take our little map and zoom out, Google Maps, and zoom out and just say, okay, we've been focusing on the streets. Let's look at the kind of the region.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there and if I'm looking at your 401k and you're coming in, I'm basically going to look at how much do you want to contribute as an employer? That's, that's one factor we need to contribute. If you don't think you're going to be able to do the 22,000, then you work down to, the simple IRA, and that's fine. If you only have, I would say 10 to 25 employees, the simple IRA, and you're not going to contribute that much, the simple IRA might be the thing for you. Next,
bottom line is that you as an owner have to look at what works best for you, budgeting and financial wise, right?
Right. I mean, it comes down to four major things to kind of encapsulate all of this. And it's really, what's your employees and size of your payroll? Your employee, and how much choice and flexibility do you want in your investment plans? You're going to have more with the simple IRA and even more with the 401k. What's the cost of a plan? What's it going to cost you not only to administer the plan? Very little administration cost with a 401k. With a simple IRA and a SEP IRA. You're going to have some administrative costs with a 401k, but you also have to look at contributions. What's your contribution cost to support your employees? And, and that, again, more flexible with a simple IRA and a 401k than you are with the SEP IRA. So you have to look at that. And then of course, the last piece is, as an owner, what am I looking to get out of this? I'm going to help my employees. They're going to save money on taxes. I'm going to make contributions. I likely would, put money away. So you really, again, how many employees and the size of payroll, and choice and flexibility for yourself and your employees, the cost of the plan, and then owner contributions. And so,
yeah, I would also imagine that one of the benefits, if you will, of for an employer is that if you're an owner, it's a nice way to try and keep your workforce somewhat stable. Because I would imagine that, well, I know I would. I'll speak for me. I'm much more likely to work for somebody who is going to offer me a retirement benefit than I am somebody who's like, come in, I'll pay you an hourly wage and you can go home and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah. No, I think, and again, I think that's absolutely important, and I think most employees see that now that, they would absolutely work for someone that's going to provide them with benefits. And I think if you're, and again, if you're a small business owner, you got, your costs are important, but there's also turnover costs, and, those are hidden costs. If you're going through, hiring 3 or 4 times for the same position, maybe you don't have to hire that, many times if your benefits were in alignment, it might save you money in the long run. So,
Yeah.
that's, when it comes to employee benefits, we like to advocate for build a nice flexible plan, not only for the employer, but, but for the employee, with their, them in mind. And so, again, we'll have some resources. It's a lot, we've used a lot of acronyms, a lot of numbers. So it might be hard to listen to. But, I think,
well, no, the bottom line here is that, come in and talk to you, right? I mean, stop in.
Yeah. I think what, and I think what it comes down to is, Stephen Covey had this great phrase, 7 habits of highly effective people. It's, begin with the end in mind, know where you want to go. I mean, a lot of people do this ad hoc planning and they think, hey, I need to do a 401k. It's like, okay, well, that's common, but maybe that's not the right thing for you. And so, I think in our suggestion would be, step back for a second, look at what are you trying to accomplish? What would you like your employees to accomplish? And then let's build a middle ground that accomplishes that. And another phrase, when it comes to retirement planning is as your business is growing, if you're just starting out, maybe there's, 1 or 2 employees, maybe the SEP IRA works and you want to get something started. And then, but, again, one of the phrases that I've heard in a book by Great by Choice, which was written by Jim Collins, written Built to Last, and, great books. And one of his phrases is, bullets before bombs. And, and I'm going to ruin this story. The best thing to do is read the book. But the analogy is back, when they were looking to during warfare at sea back in the day when ships would battle against each other, they only had so much ammunition as far as like cannonballs. And so, in order to kind of sight in their rifles and get the fall, instead of like shooting like 6 or 7 cannonballs, you use your musket and, basically do bullets and kind of sight in where you wanted to use before, hit that before you actually committed with your cannonballs. And so, the reason that's important is, and the analogy there, of course, is with your retirement plan is start small, get something started. Simple IRA doesn't cost as much, relatively easy to administer. And if you want to add a 401k, of course, there's some paperwork that needs to be processed and some deadlines that need to be met.
But you can do that as you grow. But you can do that
exactly,
as you grow.
But don't let having a 401k or a retirement plan for yourself, and your employees, don't let the sound of it think, oh, that's just for the big boys. It's only for, the S&P 500 companies. No, small business, mom and pop store right on Main Street can have a retirement plan that's going to benefit their employees and themselves. And it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg. And it doesn't have to be, complicated.
Even for any small business owners that are listening to this and maybe want to get in touch with you, have a little bit further conversation, maybe go a little more in depth, how do they get a hold of you, Jason?
Yeah, they can go to our website at www.coddingtonwealthadvisors.com, or they can give us a call 559-897-0040. We'll have some resources and some links, of course, at the end of this podcast that people can grab a hold of. And again, I think in summary, you just like you wouldn't cook a filet to 200 degrees for 5 hours. You shouldn't cook a brisket to 160 degrees on direct heat for 60 minutes. You just have a mess. Make sure you're building a retirement plan that is in alignment with your budget, and what you want to contribute along with what your employees want to do. And so in doing so, you'll end up with a great plan, and just as you would end up with a great tasting steak or an amazing brisket.
And that's what you want. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate
All right,
it.
Thank you. All right. Yes.
And
thank you.
our last thank you goes to the listeners. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. I'm sure you found this useful and helpful. Again, you know how to reach out to Jason. You just heard the information's also in the show notes. Give him a call. He'll be happy to help you out. If you are not a subscriber already, become a subscriber. Hit the subscribe button. That way you don't miss another episode of this podcast. It will be delivered to your listening device, and you don't have to worry about it, and you don't have to think about it. The other thing we'd say is if you like this podcast, if you're so moved, give it a rating and share it with others. Spread the news. Get people listening to this. And we appreciate that. On behalf of Jason and everybody at Coddington Wealth, I'm Bill Tucker, reminding you to do not wait. Go out and live your best life today. Thank you.